Chapter 2. Role of the Board of Directors. The Board of Directors is responsible for aligning interest by balancing the conflicting yet equally valid perspective of shareholders and management on issues such as capital structure, control, executive, remuneration, risk management, and shareholder rights. To further understand the details related to the role of the board, organizations should look to both local legislation and international guidelines and best practices. For organizations in Trinidad and Tobago, the primary piece of local legislation applicable to their role is the Companies Act. With respect to international best guidelines, two of the most utilized references include the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development Corporate Governance Principles 2004, Principles 6D, and the European Confederation of Directors Associations, Principle 2. Both applicable legislation and international guidelines are discussed further in the following slides. With regard to local applicable legislation, references in the Companies Act indicate that all directors have three principal legal duties, which are often referred to interchangeably as fiduciary obligations. These are to direct the management of the business and affairs of the company, Section 60B of the Companies Act, Chapter 8101, to act honestly and in good faith with a view to the best interests of the company, Section 99(1)(a) of the Companies Act, Chapter 8101, and to exercise the care, diligence, and skill of a reasonably prudent person, Section 99(1)(b) of the Companies Act, Chapter 8101. Boards have a duty of care to its shareholders. This duty of care is an obligation imposed on the board that they act on and take decisions on a fully informed basis and with due diligence. A director's duty of loyalty means that directors act exclusively in the interest of the company, which includes the interest of its employees as well as its shareholders, and do not allow their personal or any other singular interests to prevail. In order to discharge its duty of care, the board needs to ensure that it has all the relevant information about the company. In order to make fully informed decisions, directors must have access to high-quality, unbiased information, including independent professional advice paid for by the company. It is good practice for the board to specify the information that they would like to have presented by management, instead of just letting the CEO decide what is shared with the board. Required information usually relates to answering these questions. Are the results that the board directed management to achieve for the owners being achieved? To what extent is the management's strategy working? What are the risks that can endanger achievement of results? To what extent are the operations compliant with regulations set by the board? Directors of organizations registered as companies in Trinidad and Tobago have duties to ensure that the organization is compliant with all the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. International guidelines also provide guidance regarding the key functions of the board. Two primary documents used when referencing international best practice guidelines include the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, their Corporate Governance Principles 2004, Principle 6D, and the European Confederation of Directors Associations, the ECODA, Principle 2. The OECD principles indicate that boards have a function with respect to reviewing and guiding corporate strategy, major plans of action, risk policy, annual budgets and business plans, setting performance objectives, monitoring implementation and corporate performance, and overseeing major capital expenditures, acquisitions, and divestitures, monitoring the effectiveness of the company's governance practices and making changes as needed, selecting, compensating, monitoring, and, when necessary, replacing key executives and overseeing succession planning. Aligning key executive and board remuneration with the longer-term interests of the company and its shareholders. ensuring a formal and transparent board nomination and election process, monitoring and managing potential conflicts of interest of management, board members and shareholders, including misuse of corporate assets and abuse in related party transactions, ensuring the integrity of the corporation's accounting and financial reporting systems, including the independent audit, and that appropriate systems of control are in place, in particular systems for risk management, financial and operational control, and compliance with the law and relevant standards, and finally, overseeing the process of disclosure and communications. ECODA Principle 2 highlights that the board's role is to provide leadership of the company. As an intermediate step on the road to an effective main board, small and listed companies may consider the establishment of an additional advisory board without formal decision-making responsibilities. All directors must take decisions objectively in the interest of the company. As the company develops, inviting an independent director onto the board can help in focusing the board on the corporate interest. The board should elect a chairman. The chairman is responsible for leadership of the board, ensuring its effectiveness on all aspects of its role and setting its agenda. The board should appoint a chief executive or managing director to lead the management team and exercise executive authority over the operation of the company. The board should set the company's strategic objectives and ensure that the necessary financial and human resources are in place for the company to meet its objectives. The board is responsible for monitoring and evaluating management performance. The board should set the company's values and standards and ensure that its obligations to its shareholders and other stakeholders are understood and met. The board should be involved in the strategic development process and, as a minimum, approve the strategy and ensure that it lies within the framework of the shareholders' expectations. It is the responsibility of the board to ensure that the company complies with its articles of association as well as relevant legal, regulatory, and governance requirements. There should be a formal schedule of matters which states which matters are specifically reserved for the board's decision and which are to be delegated to management. Where directors have concerns which cannot be resolved about the running of the company or a proposed action, they should ensure that their concerns are recorded in the board minutes.